Hi, my name is Laura Wilson and I'm an attorney coach with barcoach.com. Today's presentation is criminal law. And what is so hard about being a first-year law student is really what's happening is you're learning a new language. That's really what the law is. So today I'm going to go over all of the issues and I'm going to give you the rules of law. Basically, I'm going to spoon feed it to you. So the issues and rules of law are very, very important for you to understand and know for your final exams. What I would recommend that you do is you use this DVD prior to reading the cases, because if you have the basic language of the law down prior to reading the cases, it'll make reading and understanding those cases much simpler for you. In addition, I would recommend that you make flashcards as you watch this presentation, because the flashcards, it forces you to use all of your senses. You're going to see it on our screen, you're going to hear it because you're going to hear me saying it, and then you're going to write it out. That forces you to use all of your senses, and you really learn the law much faster that way. In addition, I would say you could also watch this presentation when it comes to taking your final exams. And it's also applicable to those students who are taking the bar exam. So I'm going to point out to you as we go along some specifics about the bar exam and specifically the MBE portion of the bar exam as we go through this. So let's get right into it, and we're going to teach you criminal law. The first area of criminal law that we're going to go over is the 5 elements that the prosecution must prove in order to convict somebody of a crime. The first element is Actus Reyes. Element 2 is mens rea. Element 3, concurrence of Actus Reyes and mens rea. Number 4, causation. And number 5, a resulting injury or crime. Okay, so let's specifically go over Actus Reyes. Actus Reyes is very simple. It's just a guilty act that is done consciously and voluntary. So are we going to hold somebody criminally liable for an act that is not volitional and not voluntary? No, we're not. So let's go over some examples. Some examples of non-volitional acts would be someone who's driving a car, has no history of being ill, and they have a stroke and they hit somebody in a sidewalk. Are they going to be guilty of a crime of hitting somebody in that sidewalk for that non-volitional act? No. Another classic example of someone who commits a crime where it's non-volitional is when they're sleepwalking. People have actually been found not guilty of murder because their claim or their defense is that they had a sleepwalking disorder and they committed the murder while they were sleepwalking. That is an actual defense that people have used. So it's a non-volitional act, non-conscious act that we're not going to hold people liable for. So let's talk about omissions to act. What's an omission to act? That's when you don't help somebody who may need some help. So for example, are we going to hold somebody liable for an omission to act? The general rule on omission to act is that we're not going to hold somebody liable because you do not owe a duty to go to the aid of another in peril. Again, the general rule on the omissions to act is you do not owe a duty to go to the rescue of someone who is in peril. Exceptions, yes, that's the whole thing about law, is that we have lots of exceptions to the rules. So where would we find exceptions to the omissions to act? The omissions to act, sometimes there are duties to act that are prescribed by law. So for example, you have a duty to automatically pay your taxes. If you don't, if you fail to act and pay your taxes, you can be held liable for tax evasion. Another example is when you are contracted by duty to come to the aid of another. So for example, one of the classic examples that's often used is a lifeguard at a pool. He's been being paid to be there to rescue and save people. He's sitting up there flirting with a couple cute girls. Someone's drowning and he says, "Forget that person, I'm going to hit on these chicks right here." If the victim drowns, we can hold that lifeguard guilty of involuntary manslaughter for his failure to act because he's required by contract to act on behalf of the people who he's there to protect. Another example would be relationships may impose a duty to act. Husband and wife have a duty to come to the aid of each other. Parent-child have a duty to come to the aid of each other, or at least the parent does to the child. And you might even have, under an employee-employer, a duty to act. So that's what the Actus Reyes is about. Remember, it's a volitional act that is conscious, okay? And there are times when we'll hold people liable for omissions to act, failure to act. General rule is you don't owe anybody a duty to come to the aid of a stranger. However, there are those exceptions, and we've went over those. Those are by contract, by law, and by relationship. So look for those in an exam.